Hello, LinkedIn, for a new question and answer session live here with Amit Bagga, the Chief Revenue Officer of FarEye. Very happy to have him here with us. He gave an insightful presentation last week during the Makers and Movers Summit, and we will be taking some of the questions that came out of there today, as well as always. Comment your questions live, and we will try to take as many as possible and ask Amit. So just as a way of a brief introduction, so FarEye is obviously one of the leading software as a service companies enabling digital logistics. Amit is, as I said, the Chief Revenue Officer. He's also a member of the Board of Advisors at One Cloud Hub. And he has previously held significant positions at Blue Yonder, which was previously called JDA, and many of you know them, as well as Oracle, where he drove profitable growth across the Asia-Pacific region. Amit is an experienced business leader with a lot of history in driving growth in cloud software as well as IT services. And he has a lot of background in cloud solutions, in services business growth, in customer success, go-to-market strategies, and professional services. So great pleasure to have you with us, Amit, and thanks for taking the time once again.
Excellent. Greetings, Radu, and hello, everyone. Good to be here. Always a pleasure to talk to Radu.
Pleasure. I want to start with, COVID-19. Now there's some end in sight. There's the vaccines that seem to be coming up one by one, and I guess somewhere at the beginning of next year they'll be rolling out. But in terms of specifically real-time transportation visibility technology, and a lot of that will be applied, by the way, to the vaccine distribution. Tell us a little bit about its role. How do you see it developing over the next quarters and in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, Radu. So I think before we start on the real-time visibility, I just want to say, a big thank you to the supply chain professionals that have brought us this far. In the last 9 months, it's been quite a tumultuous 9 months, and the big predictions, the naysayers, and everybody talked about things falling apart, goods running out, empty shelves everywhere, and massive calamity of lack of resources. That didn't happen, and the reason that didn't happen, or it was tough times. We folks had to work, burn the midnight oil. The supply chain professionals had to step up in their games and build things. But quite frankly, we came out quite well, and we're on a path of more recovery. I guess this is the fashionable new normal. But the fact is, the supply chains professionals in the world stepped up and delivered to the promise of making sure that there's goods available at all points in time. Now, having said that, there's been a lot of learnings that we've had in this period of time. There's been a lot of understanding of some core things that have to change in the business moving forward, and it's not just the pandemic. And I do believe the situation, the new ways in which we will continue to operate as we have been now in building up to and continue to operate, are here to stay. It's not that as soon as the vaccine's on or the cure is done, we will go back to normal. Organizations have moved online. Organizations have, the direct to consumer is growing significantly, and consumers have a different way in which they interact with brands and products. Manufacturers have to make sure that they have visibility across the supply chains, and that leads me to the point of real-time visibility and why that becomes important. As we know, the manufacturing companies and logistics companies really struggled in the beginning to understand the impact of factories not being able to operate, reduction of manpower, reduction of resources to be able to fulfill the demand coming in. And it became spiky, where certain products had very high spikes, whilst others were, quite frankly, on a decline for a period of time, and it's starting to crawl back up. What this meant was, organizations like, companies had to really swap over and pay higher emphasis on products and increase manufacturing, increase capacity, increase distribution capacities of products that were in high demand, and also consolidate inventories and make sure that they had frugal and tight business practices on the types of inventories that were going down. Not that many shut down, whilst obviously that was there. In all of this, what was important for our customers to know and understand was exactly what is there at what point in time within their network to be able to make decisions. Getting real-time access to data that allowed them to make actionable decisions around position of inventory cross-border across in a multimodal scenario was super critical. And then not just taking data, but then being able to act on it. So that forced the need for organizations like us to integrate with a significant number of carriers and 3PLs and other companies in the world, and allow them to share data in real time through GPS devices and other IoT tools to be able to consume data and then present it to these organizations, who integrated them back into their overall systems like transport management systems, supply planning system, demand planning systems, etc., and being able to make decisions that allowed them to flex their supply chains in a very agile manner. If we could give them visibility that there is a shutdown of a factory in a certain area because of, say, the pandemic breaking up, and then there is overcapacity in other factories, or there is undercapacity in certain factories, and then what would be the supply lanes from there to be able to then distribute and carry the loads in a actionable and a manner that doesn't break the bank, right? So those are the kind of decisions that we help companies take, and I think increasingly that has become more and more important. It's not just the pandemic, the challenges we've had with the global trade agreements, the challenges we are having with just the ability for people to come on board, get retrained, and start building up capacity is going to continue to do that, right? And yeah, sorry, go on. No. I was gonna add one more important thing is, I mentioned that briefly, but direct to consumer, this pandemic has taught us that direct to consumer has become increasingly important. I think about 40% of the consumer products companies in the US have gone direct to consumer, right, which they weren't before, just in the period of the last 9 months. What that means is now the ability for those companies to fulfill demand in a unstructured in a area that they've not operated it before is going to force a lot more of visibility in the supply chain for them to be able to do that.
I'll take this question from Ayad, who's
my friend.
Yeah, you know each other. Okay, great. And it's a super relevant question in terms of last mile, in terms of, how do you see the future of that moving more and more towards crowdsourced variable models? What's your thoughts, Amit?
I think so. Yeah, they're spot on over here. It is super important for us to explore really what technology is being able to bring to the fore, and remain light on assets. The demand has fluctuated significantly, and the reason I know the situation with the yard is, they have really he's been in an environment where things have spiked 400 or 500 times in certain deliveries during the pandemic because of certain areas, and then you just can't plan for stuff like that. You can't plan for that. Driver crowdsourcing, using technologies around driver crowdsourcing, using technologies around being able to snap to the requirements, being able to fulfill those requirements in a timely manner, because it's not just the fact that you have to take the order and it's a monetary aspect, it's also representative of your brand. Ability, just like you walk in the supermarket store and the empty shelves basically means that you have that many less customers coming to your supermarket at the end. That has now moved into the online world, right? And therefore, using technologies like driver crowdsourcing, using technologies like being able to have that the same level of technology in crowdsourced drivers, in short-term contract with carriers, and flex demand, but still give that same experience to the customer, is becoming increasingly important. And it's, quite frankly, it's going to become increasingly hard for companies to become asset heavy in these environments. Given we talked about agile supply chains. So if agile supply chains start from the consumer side, being able to understand that demand in the short term, being able, and then given the fact that we have technology which is enabling consumers to interact so diversely with the brands, means organizations trying to build asset heavy solutions like that will remain a challenge. So using technology, using relationships, collaboration, multi-enterprise collaboration, plus collaboration with companies that drive driver crowdsourcing kind of solutions becomes super important.
Now for the $1 million question: how to do it? so Simon, from the event platform, is basically asking you. I couldn't have planned this even if I wanted. And actually, Ayad is on LinkedIn and Simon is on the event platform, so they haven't actually seen each other's question. But there you go. So I guess the next question is, how do you do that?
Okay, so there's always three elements to it, and I think I was reading it in one of Gartner's reports as well, around what's happening, what 2021 is going to see in supply chains, right? So I think we will slowly see us from a technology perspective. So obviously there's three things. There's the reorganization and organizational challenges within supply chain. Then how do you reorganize to meet the demand? I am not as well qualified, and I participated in another panel of yours where some of the other speakers spoke beautifully about that, from Lenovo, Johnson & Johnson, and Nestle. And I would urge the speakers to go through that piece around the organizational restructuring and reprioritization, and working out what types of KPIs would work to drive flexible and agile supply chains. The second thing comes around the process and the changes around supply chain process, decision-making processes, procurement processes, etc. I would rather delve more into the technology aspect of that, which is where I'm more comfortable. Is what's really going to become important is to move away from the large monolithic solutions that take a long time to change to the whiplash effect of changes in the supply chain, and move towards a much more agile approach of tools and applications that use real-time information from IoT based devices to make actionable, to provide the data, being able to have applications converse across their silos of within the organizations, and really help consolidate data and then reuse the data in a much more meaningful way. So getting cross-application engagements, being able to understand how transportation warehousing works with real-time visibility, works with last mile delivery applications, to be able to provide that kind of experience for the customers, being able to change and flex quickly. You have seen now newer technologies like micro fulfillment centers being able to be deployed very quickly into smaller footprint areas, and then help create demand. Now, those elements will all need to be interconnected to provide that single brand experience for our customers, right? I won't mention names, but gone are the days of the big monolithic single brand applications that you would take 6 months to a year to develop, right? You want to be able to go live with applications, trial them out within a 1 month, weeks to 1 or 2 months time frames. You also want to be able to look at decision making through approaches like control towers, which help you look at what's happening within your network and supply chains and being able to make those decisions. More importantly, I think now, as we in the next 12 months, what I think will be much more emergent is your multi-enterprise collaboration, right? Where organizations within supply chain. So in fact, I started talking about the fact that it's a supply network, not a supply chain. Because getting networked between organizations, being able to share data between organizations in a meaningful way becomes increasingly important as we go through. If you look at it from a network perspective, right, there are suppliers, there are suppliers who are working with logistics companies to be able to get goods to retailers, who are working with also with distribution companies, and at the end of the day, driving a higher consumer experience, right? If I take an extreme example, given the fact that the consumers, 80%, 60% of the consumers' buying decision comes from the experience they have on the product and not exactly the product itself. What that means is that now the multi-enterprise collaboration to provide that kind of experience to the customer becomes super important. What does collaboration mean? Multi-enterprise collaboration mean? It means very, very smart and a meaningful way exchange of data, being able to leverage that data, and being able to orchestrate the movement of goods to the end consumer, right? And the only way to do that is to look at how we from a technology perspective, is to look at bite-sized chunks, look at technologies that are driving much more machine learning to be able to self-correct and self-learn the trends, IoT-driven applications. I'm seeing now even blockchain coming into the play because transparency becomes super important as well, right? We have been trying for years, and one of my dear friends, one of the top supply chain professionals, always talks about empty miles. How do you take empty miles out of the traditional solutions? And the traditional models have struggled to do that, and just between the two largest grocery retailers in Australia, I was hearing the other day that there's about $500 million worth of empty miles, right? Newer technologies that give ability for customers to take decisions, to be able to leverage data to make to capture those empty miles. Just imagine how much we can put back in and drive a better, much more sustainable environment with carbon emission reductions, etc. Right? So, long answer short, that's I see the use of the new technologies along with a judicious use of data to be the future.
And talking about what's going to happen in the next, next year, next 2 years, depending on the region of the vaccine, and the whole rollout will take a massive capacity out of it will take a significant capacity out of the supply chains, especially the cold chain, the refrigerated chains. How do you see that impacting the rest of, all of a sudden vaccine will be prioritized? It's like the iPhone, right? The capacity goes to the iPhone launch or whatever it may be. It's going to go to the vaccine. It's going to be other goods that are not going to have that capacity. How do you see that dynamic playing out in the next months and 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, that's actually a very, very valid question, and it's not just the capacity for the vaccine distribution. Actually, we spent a lot of time within the company thinking about this ourselves, and we realized, it's not. And I'll address your topic, but I want to preface that by saying it's not just the vaccine distribution. The vaccine production, distribution, etc. There's going to be a lot of ancillary industries that will get impacted and be created potentially with this, right? The packing technologies, right? They will have to change the ways in which it will be administered will create another set of industries, right? How it's administered, how it's roll back, what happens with the waste that comes out of that? We see we see the industry getting impacted from a capacity perspective, not just for the pure vaccine delivery, which I guess everybody's focused on, but also what happens as side effects to that, right? Aside from capacity. So given that, we see the increasing need. Come back to the same thing. There has never been a greater need for a multi-enterprise collaboration than the coming impending pressure on the distribution of the vaccine. Organized cold chain operators, refrigerated drug operators, and they will need to be able to collaborate between themselves. Quite frankly, be completely brand agnostic for a while, so that we are utilizing capacity and being able to share data with each other, and understand, work how that happens without taking competitive advantage, without taking commercial impacts and those kind of things. But how do we actually share data to harmonize that capacity across the board, while not impacting the meat distribution and fruits and vegetables distribution, which are also in temperature controlled environments over time, storage distribution. So there's going to be, we will need a deep set of collaboration between these elements, and the tools that we have in place will need to step up to not only drive a sense and react kind of a model, not only talk about the track and trace of the solutions, or visibility of the solution, but then also look at how we can dive down a little deeper to understand what is the impact on capacity in each of those trade lanes, each of these truck lanes, and elements like that. The second thing we also have to work out in that aspect is the driver health and safety elements, and how do you tie those into the decision making for the organizations as well, because some of these are going to be going across borders, across this thing, and they're going to be time sensitive. It's not like we can actually manufacture a whole bunch of extra temperature controlled trucks or other vessels, right? So I guess there has been never a greater need for visibility and real-time visibility and decision-making and integration between different control towers, integration between the different transport management systems, and capacity management.
Another challenge, and it's coming up in some of the questions as well, and there's another reality in place with supply chain professionals that have perhaps been in the profession and in the trade for a while. And I've gotten this from a different service provider, technology provider, and the challenge they faced, and I'm just curious if you face the same, is that sometimes the executives in supply chain don't realize the full extent that technology can help them, or don't even understand how, the full extent of how it can be applied to their issues and their challenges. And it's almost like there's a need for a layer of educating them before they understand what they can do with the tool. Do you find this the same? And if yes, what are some ways in which, I guess we can speed up that process?
Short answer is yes. Long answer is yes. But I guess there's a few things, right? One is it is incumbent on providers like us to also step up in the game, to be much more consultative and contextual in what we do. Technology for technology's sake doesn't help anyone, but understanding use cases and then helping those convert those use cases into much more contextual information and data that the users can consume will be super important. I always tell my teams, past and present, is a supply chain project is actually like doing a open heart surgery on a marathon runner while he's running the marathon, right? Because it's not like toilet paper can stop going to the shelf for 3 months while I implement my supply chain solution. It doesn't work like that, right? And therefore, being sensitive to that and providing context, and working with customers to understand, what's the value creation in this space, and how does the ROI work? What is the value creation? What are the steps in which you do it, and how do you crawl, walk, run, and mature into delivering those KPIs is important. Now, coming back from the users of technologies perspective, right? A couple of things. I think one important thing that the companies need to do is really re-examine the procurement processes around technology. We I still see archaic procurement processes which are more driven with some of the standard KPIs and spreadsheet mechanism. Whereas, with technology being what it is today and the way it's evolving, the mature buyers are looking at more about interacting with their technology partners, and taking incremental steps towards driving continuous improvement, learning about what the impact of something within their network is, within their supply chain is, and then opening up more functionality, understanding how that impacts, and then new functionality. Whereas what happens in current models is you have a kind of a distant relationship between the buyer and the technology provider for a while, until it's too late, and that's when you start looking to build partnerships. I think taking that leap of faith and crossing the chasm to actually have an interactive procurement model, and a more innovative way in which you interact with the buyers, and a knowledge flow on both ways. Because, to be honest, nobody knows what tomorrow's technology is going to do. We know what it can do today. We need to work and partner together to figure out how to solve the problems of tomorrow. Supply chains are not built within the four walls of an office. They're built out in the networks.
And I will definitely remember your analogy. It paints a picture, a very strong picture, and quite an accurate one, because that's exactly what pretty much happens. With the heart surgery. So no, I'll use that. There's one question that has come in from Simon, and I'll pick it. That the productions will be limited to some countries, and this is for the vaccines. Even though the production was big enough, is it physically possible to transport and distribute the vaccine for everyone at the same time scale? I guess the short answer is no, but I'll throw it to you, Amit.
Yeah, I think it's even if it was basically a big mountain of vaccine ready to be distributed. Let's just assume that hypothetically, there is a lot of complexity in the way this happens, right? A transport of medical goods require, there is time as one element. There is things like the temperature control we talked about. There is expiry dates that we talked about. And therefore, a centralized distribution will probably, and again, I'm hypothesizing on this one, but it will need a much more complex and distribution network for us to be able to drive that. And quite frankly, it's not clearly understood yet. This is where the governments are planning around, where would be the nodes from which the distribution will happen, how much will it happen from those nodes. I don't think it's a matter of who needs more, who needs less. It's more about logistically, where can the nodes be created, potentially how does the cross-border movement work, what's the amount of time that it can stay within the refrigeration, what's the expiry dates, and then we have to be able to it's almost like a white glove delivery model, where you will need to deliver, administer safely, and return back elements, right? So I guess it's not a grocery distribution model, or it's not a frozen meat distribution model. It's actually something that has to be delivered, administered, and brought back. Whether it happens in nodes, whether it's happening in hospitals, whether it's happening in local dispensaries, etc. Again, that matters, right? Because you may have a large B2B consignment that may be easier to do. And then once you start getting into a smaller B2B, where we are going into mom and pop kind of small dispensary shops, etc., stores, etc., like that, it starts becoming much more complex. So I think it's not just a matter of the capacity itself. It's a matter of understanding at what nodes does it have to be delivered, what's the time period, what's the expiry dates, and what's the return process, how do you safely bring things back in as well.
And I guess a lot of that will be answered in the next, well, probably from January onwards, when we'll start seeing some case studies of and obviously, as always in supply chain, professionals will build upon that and get better and better. There's also, and Ray is commenting on the minus 70 degrees requirement. Well, at least that's what Pfizer declared. We had, just to add on that, one we will do in the next weeks. We want to put together a panel just discussing vaccines, because now everybody is pretty much wondering how that will play out. So Ray, Simon, we'll get something going on that. But secondly, Professor Yossi Sheffi from MIT was sharing that in his view, both Moderna and Pfizer executives sold off their shares the moment they announced the vaccine. And he was sharing that based on his knowledge, J&J is going to come up with the vaccine that one will be stored at room temperature, or can be stored at room temperature or fridge temperature, so fairly decent conditions. And it's only one shot, whereas Pfizer and Moderna require 2 shots to be administered. So if that is going to play out like that or not, but eventually I'm pretty sure that this minus 70 will be, and even Pfizer now is working, because it's not possible. I mean, you cannot increase the volume. That is just an insanely low temperature to transport the vaccine. So I think eventually it will be more of a doable type of a minus, I don't know, whatever it might be, minus 2 to 10. But the future will show us how we're gonna in the next couple of months.
We'll need folks to understand what's the package we're delivering, and then we've got guys like us will go back and figure out now how to deliver that package with the right conditions, on time, and in full. Right. That's going to be the challenge that some of us will be focused on. We're waiting for them to define the package.
I mean, there's going to be, like you rightfully said, there's going to be significant challenges with the manufacturers of packaging, and the manufacturer of syringes, and the manufacturers of the containers where we need to transport. So I think all good fun, exciting times for the supply chain profession, and a time that the profession will be even further elevated, because it's pretty much supply chain to distribute and make sure that the world gets vaccinated. And
the only thing I would add on that, Radu, what I'm excited about is to see my pet topic, which is how much collaboration will this lead to between the enterprises, right? Between the manufacturers, between the distribution companies, between the administration companies. What's the kind of collaboration? Because I feel this, just like the pandemic forced a lot of other technology adoptions, what I'm really excited about is the stuff that we talk about, which is getting visibility and being able to make real-time decisions, and then driving a higher consumer experience. And then we talked about, being able to use technologies like crowdsourcing and driver crowdsourcing, being able to flex between carriers. Translate this into the next pressure point, which is the vaccine distribution. What I'm excited about is how do supply chain professionals come together now in this space, collaborate, use data, and execute to the promise we're going to have to make.
Fingers crossed that it happens, because collaboration is a word that has been used for a long time. You've been around many more years than I have been around, but in all truthfulness, there's always that, okay, I'm going to, keep it close to my chest, and I'm going to beat the competition, or I don't trust you, or, whatever. And now, also from a government perspective, if we think a little bit practically, the government might step in and say, look, guys, I mean, you get it done, make sure because ultimately this is no longer a pure business. It's a national security, national health, economy. I mean, it's
global head,
So awesome. Well, with that being said, Amit, I want to thank you for your time. We have a couple of other questions. I'll take you offline in the interest of time, and you might want to address it. So good luck with everything at FarEye. keep up the good work. Stay healthy, and let's see what the next very interesting weeks and months will bring us.
Absolutely. It was always a pleasure talking to you, Radu, and Andre and the Alcott team. You guys do a fantastic job. Always a pleasure.